it says that there's nature and culture, and then there's you. And the you that's in there has choices and a destiny, and that you actually affect the interplay of nature and culture in determining your own character. And it insists upon that. The oldest stories we have, there's always the hero and the archetypal mother and the archetypal father. There's always those three things. There's never just two. So from the narrative perspective, there's always the implication that there's something autonomous about the hero of the story. And you know, you can't account for that. We don't have a good way of accounting for that from a scientific perspective. I was having a discussion with Sam Harris the other day. Sam Harris is one of the four famous, you know, atheists, and he's a determinist, just right down to the bottom. It's like you're determined, there's no free will, you're a deterministic machine. And you know, if you're a coherent scientist and you're a Newtonian, roughly speaking, you don't really have much choice other than to think that way. But that isn't how it seems to people, and we don't treat each other that way. And our entire legal system is predicated on the idea that you do in fact have free will.
My family has recently discovered this YouTube channel called Daily Dose of Wisdom, and we really enjoy it. And last night in particular, I really enjoyed the video that the guy put out. I don't even know his name, but you know, I know he's a C.S. Lewis fan because he's got Narnia books in the back, and I know he's not a Calvinist, and I really appreciate the variety of videos that he shares. So in this particular episode, it was an atheist talking with Jordan Peterson, and I think the topic was meaning. And so they show a snippet of their conversation, but then his commentary is what I wanted to share with you guys today. I know this word gets thrown around a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot of confusion. The word sovereignty simply means supreme ruler. And I shouldn't say simply, because that's pretty big. That's a big deal. Supreme ruler, ruler of all. Is God that? Most definitely. He is the supreme ruler, the creator of all. There is no one above him. And in his sovereignty, he has made man in his image and given them dominion over the world, right? In Calvinism and in Reformed theology, they take the word sovereignty and make an actual doctrine out of it. It is no longer just the normal meaning that you and I would recognize, but there's an actual doctrine attached to it. And it is determinism. It is that God has decreed all things before the foundation of the world. Nothing that happens unless he has decreed it. Nothing can happen other than what happens. All events are fixed. They have been predetermined. They are set in stone. There's no such thing as possibilities. So when you take that to its logical conclusion, that absolutely everything is set in stone, there's no such thing as possibilities, it immediately removes away the responsibility of man, because if God has decreed all things, including yours and my sin, then are we really blameworthy? And if God has decreed all things, including who's going to believe in him and who's not, then is anyone really guilty of not believing in him? And these are all the questions that come up with determinism. And so they have compatibilism, which is also a philosophical viewpoint. So determinism is philosophy, compatibilism is also philosophy. And so compatibilism claims that determinism and man's free will somehow are compatible, even though they seem to contradict. I would argue, since they seem to contradict, they clearly do. But we surrender that doubt and that obvious contradiction to mystery and say, even though we can't understand it, somehow, some way, God decreeing all things, no possibilities being possible, nothing happening other than what happens could be possible, and man's blameworthiness, man being held guilty for the things they do, even though the things they do have been decreed. They have no control over what they do because their choice is predetermined. They couldn't do otherwise. Somehow that's compatible. And so that's where the term compatibilism comes from. You may have, 20 decisions in front of you, but really you only have one, because the only one you could possibly choose is the one that has already been predetermined for you to choose. And you could not choose the other 19. Even though you have 20 in front of you, you would always choose that one because that's the one God predetermined you to choose. But since you feel like you're choosing it, they call it freedom. And so you and I know that that is not real freedom, because real freedom is the freedom to choose or not choose something. There's so many people that could further and better explain compatibilism for you. I would highly recommend Jerry Walls. I will post a link to the video in the description box that I would go to. It is a video that you have to sit and pay close attention to, because unless you're in that world of philosophy, it's going to be like, what is he saying? But I like that he brings it down to my level, who is not in the philosophical world, and helps anyone understand what exactly is this claim of compatibilism in the Christian world. So in a nutshell, compatibilism is called compatibilism because it is claiming that God's determinism and man's blameworthiness, even though God's predetermined that they do all the things they do, that they reject him, that they sin, that they're still blameworthy somehow, and that even though those things seem to contradict, they actually don't, and they're compatible. Of course, there's many views in the philosophical world. Apart from the church, there's determinists, there's compatibilists, there's incompatibilists, and so on. And in the church, there's mostly, I believe, libertarian free willers. We believe that you are free to choose or not choose something, even though I do believe there are forces in the spiritual realm that are fighting and at war for our souls, and there's things that influence us. I don't think that we fall helpless victim to anything. I feel like we have our moral compass given to us by God, our conscience given to us by God. We know right from wrong, and we have our the capacity to reason and to think and to choose, and we choose sin and we choose not sin. And then in the church, there's also just flat out determinists, which most Calvinists would not call themselves determinists. Most Calvinists would call themselves compatibilists. But I would argue that compatibilism is determinism with a little extra fluff, because compatibilism is not omitting determinism. It is still including determinism. God is in meticulous control of all things, predetermining all things, no possibilities. Nothing could happen other than the way that it happens. Everything is absolutely fixed with no other possible way of it occurring. So with that said, I want to share the incredible argument that this brother brings, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I think the argument can be applied to this as well as probably many other things.
If you were standing at the edge of a cliff and you didn't believe in gravity, but when faced with the opportunity to take a step forward or not, you chose not to, that decision actually tells you what you really believe. You can say that you don't believe in gravity, but if you don't step forward off of the cliff, you actually do. In other words, our behaviors actually give us the best insight into what we believe, better than what we say we believe. So for Susan Blackmore here, if she's living as if meaning is real, then she really does believe in meaning. But the problem is that she can't ground her belief in meaning inside of her worldview. So instead, she kind of is playing this weird pretend game where meaning, we pretend that it exists, or we pretend that it has a legitimate rootedness in biology when it doesn't. There's another option here, which is to question that foundation. If the foundation of your worldview itself can't sufficiently explain the things that you actually believe and the things that you actually live out of in your life, then rather than doing this mental gymnastics, why not question the foundation? No, you are for something. You exist because you were wanted, and you have eternity written into your heart. Whatever those things are, those beliefs, ideas, questions, obstacles, doubts that you have about God, focus on those. Don't begin with a insufficient foundation of explaining the real world that you live in and the real understanding that you have about yourself, that there really is meaning to life, that it is actually more than just a cosmic accident, that it's actually for something. We're participating in a story. We're unique from the rest of creation, and the decisions that we make actually eternally matter. I hope I can poke a few holes into this sort of dark tool shed of materialism so that some light can shine through. I know this doesn't answer everything, but I just plead with you to consider that if God is real, then things are eternally meaningful. And if there is no God, then things simply don't matter. But we know that things do matter. We sense that they do, and we live like they do, which means that we actually believe that they do. So all that I'm urging is let's connect these two pieces together and root the real meaning that we know exists in the world inside of its proper source, which is God himself.
So isn't that incredible? I believe that I, myself, even though I said I was a compatibilist, and even though I said that God has preordained all things before the foundation of the world for my good and for his glory, I clearly wasn't living that way, because I woke up every single day with intentionality, with purpose. I have been teaching my children the Proverbs and the wisdom that I believe they need to develop good, godly character to carry out through their life. I have exercised for years, eaten healthy for years, fed my family healthy for years. I have read my Bible for years, invested in relationships, and do things that with an end goal in mind, that I'm working towards things. And I think that those activities and that way of living proves that I believe that my actions have immense power and possibilities exist. But I had a disconnect in my mind clearly. If I truly had stopped and pondered, wait a minute, I claim this, but I live like this. Disconnect here. These things are not matching. So do I believe this? Am I sure I believe this? And if I had been pressed a little and challenged a little and maybe gone and looked in the scriptures for some examples, not just the actual proof text that I would have gone to say, yeah, God works this way, but actually like started at Genesis and reading, I would have probably found myself questioning a lot sooner than I did. And so that's what I want to leave you with today, a loving challenge to really stop and ask yourself, if you're a Calvinist, do you live like everything you do has been set in stone? Nothing you do really is going to change anything. If you pray for your children today or not, maybe they'll believe, maybe they won't, kind of out of your hands, because God's already predetermined whether they're going to believe or not. He's already chosen them or not chosen them. There's nothing you could do. Do you live that way? Do you live with that attitude? Do you live with that mindset? Do you live with that heart set? I don't know anyone that lives like that. Every Calvinist I've ever known lives with purpose, with intentional decision making. They pray for their children. They share the gospel with their children. They have hope for their children. I mean, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say anything like, I'm not going to pray for my kids today because honestly, what's it going to do? You know, they're either elect or not. Either way, if I pray or not, it's not going to change anything. So in the end, like, we all just have to sit with ourselves and be honest and really consider what we're thinking and feeling, and not just ignore it or deny it or cover it up and drown it out with distractions or watching 20 John Piper videos. We've got to really just sit alone. You either believe that everything's fixed in stone, or double check your starting point of determinism, of compatibilism. And I would highly recommend reading just Genesis. Don't even worry. I mean, you could read everything, but just read Genesis and find where God is offering choices and instruction and leaving it up to the person to decide what to do. To say that God offers choice, but really doesn't mean it, first of all, you're reading that into the text because it's not there. Second of all, what kind of a God does that? Cain, sin is crouching at your door. You must master it. But you're not really going to master it because my plan is actually for you to go kill your brother. No. God is warning him and trying to help him to chill out and not go do the sin that he's about to commit if he does not master that sin. But Cain doesn't listen, and he goes and murders his brother. God did not predetermine for him to murder his brother. God tried to warn him and told him exactly what he needed to do. But he didn't. He chose to disobey God, not God predetermined for him to disobey God, so he chose to disobey God. He just chose to disobey God. He could have obeyed God, just like Adam and Eve could have obeyed God, and Abraham could have disobeyed God. I mean, it's not just actors in a play playing the role that God programmed them to play. We're real people with real purpose and real meaning and real power to influence our life, our world, and our future, and the future of our world. We really, really are. And God has designed it that way. In his supreme ruler authority of his sovereignty, he has designed it that way. In fact, when he says, let us make man in our own image, right after he says how he's going to give man dominion on the earth. That's the design that he made for us. So I hope this video is challenging and it encourages you to stop and really consider what maybe you claim to believe, but actually don't live like you believe, and check the foundation that you're standing on. Is it solid, or is it worth double checking? Because if you can't live by that foundation, then it seems like maybe you don't believe it. And I'm confident that if you go and explore the scriptures, you will see that you are free, you have choices, your choices matter, and they affect you and those around you. God bless you guys, and see you next time.